Hey everybody, it's time for another chapter. It's almost my bedtime, so one more chapter before I go to sleep. And this one's called The Great Plan. So if you'll remember, Sophie is tired of these giants, and she doesn't think it's fair what's happening, and she is determined to do something. And the BFG is kind of resigned to it. This is kind of just part of his life that he's come to accept. So let's see if she can convince him. The Great Plan. "We've absolutely got to stop them," Sophie cried. "Put me in your pocket and quick, and we'll chase after them and warn everyone in England they're coming." "Redunculous and impossible," the BFG said. "They is going 2 times as fast as me, and they is finishing their guzzle before we is halfway." "But we can't just sit here and do nothing," Sophie cried. "How many girls and boys are they going to eat tonight?" "Many," the BFG said. "The flesh lump-eating giant alone has the most squackling, wopsy appetite." "Will he snatch them out of their beds while they're sleeping?" "Like peas out of a pottle," the BFG said. "I can't bear to think of it," Sophie cried. "Then don't," the BFG said. "For years and years I is sitting here on this very rock every night after night when they is galloping away. And I is feeling so sad for all the human beings they's going to gobble up. But I has had to get used to it. There is nothing I can do. If I wasn't a titchy little runty giant of only 24 feet high, I would be stopping them. But that is absolutely out the window." "Do you always know where they're going?" Sophie asked. "Always," said the BFG. "Every night they is yelling at me as they go bootling past. The other day they is yelling, 'We is off to Mississippi and Missouri to guzzle them both.'" "Disgusting," Sophie said. "I hate them." She and the BFG sat quietly side by side on the blue rock in the gathering dusk. Sophie had never felt so helpless in her life. After a while, she stood up and cried out, "I just can't stand it! Just think of those poor girls and boys who are going to be eaten alive in a few hours' time. We can't just sit here and do nothing. We've got to go after those brutes." "No," said the BFG. "We must! Why won't you go?" The BFG sighed and shook his head firmly. "I has told you 5 or 6 times," the BFG said, "and the 3rd will be the last. I is never showing myself to human beings." "Why ever not?" "If they do, they will be putting me in the zoo with all the jiggy raffs and catty piddlers." "Nonsense," Sophie said. "And they will be sending you straight back to an orphanage," the BFG went on. "Grown-up human beings is not famous for their kindnesses. They is all squiffle rotters and grink sludgers." "That is simply not true," Sophie cried angrily. "Some of them are very kind indeed." "Who?" said the BFG. "Name one." "Oh, the Queen of England," Sophie said. "You can't call her a squiffle rotter or a grink sludger." "Well," the BFG said, "you can't call her a squeak pip or a not mucher either," Sophie said, getting angrier and angrier. "The flesh lump eater is longing dearly to guzzle her up," the BFG said, smiling a little now. "Who, the Queen?" Sophie said, aghast. "Yes," the BFG answered. "Flesh lump eater says he is never eating a queen, and thinks perhaps she has an especially scrumdiddlyumptious flavor." "How dare he!" Sophie cried. "But the flesh lump eater says there is too many soldiers around her palace and dursn't try it." "He better not." "He is also saying he would very much like to guzzle one of those soldiers in the pretty red suits, but he is worried about those big black furry hats they is wearing. He thinks they might be sticking in his throat." "I hope he chokes," Sophie said. "Flesh lump eater is a very careful giant," the BFG said. Sophie was silent for a few minutes. Then, suddenly, in a voice filled with excitement, she cried out, "I've got it! By golly, I think I've got it!" "Got what?" asked the BFG. "The answer!" cried Sophie. "We'll go to the Queen! It's a terrific idea! If I went and told the Queen about those disgusting man-eating giants, I'm sure she'd do something about it. The BFG looked down at her sadly and shook his head. She is never believing you, he said. Never! In a month of Mondays. I think she would. Never, the BFG said. It is sounding like such a wonky, tall story. The Queen will be laughing and saying, "What awful rub squash." She would not. Of course she would, the BFG said. I has told you before, human beings is simply not believing in giants. Then it's up to us to find a way to make her believe in them, Sophie said. And how is you getting in to see the Queen anyway? The BFG asked. Now, hold on a sec, Sophie said. Just you hold on a sec, because I've got another idea. Your ideas is full of crodswoggle, the BFG said. Not this one, Sophie said. You say that if we tell the Queen she would never believe us? I is certain that she wouldn't. But we are going to tell her, Sophie said excitedly. We don't have to tell her. We'll make her dream it. That is an even more froth-bungling suggestion, the BFG said. Dreams is lots of fun, but nobody is believing in dreams either. You was only believing in a dream while you was actually dreaming it. But as soon as you was waking up, you was saying, oh, thank goodness it was only a dream. Don't you worry about that part of it, Sophie said. I can fix that. Never can you fix it, the BFG said. I can! I swear I can. But first of all, let me ask you a very important question. Here it is. Can you make a person dream anything in the world? Anything I like, the BFG said proudly. If I said I wanted to dream that I was in a flying bathtub with silver wings, you could make me dream it? I could. But how? Sophie said. You obviously don't have exactly that dream in your collection. I do not, the BFG said, but I could be mixing it up. How could you mix it up? It is a little bit like mixing a cake, the BFG said. If you was putting in the right amounts of all different things into it, you was making a cake come out any way you want. Sugary, spongy, curranty, Christmassy, grob switchy. It is the same with dreams. Go on, Sophie said. I has dillions of dreams on my shelf, right or left. Right. I has dreams about bathtubs, lots of them. I has dreams about silver wings. I has dreams about flying. So all I has to do is mix those dreams together in the proper way, and I is very quickly making a dream where you is flying a bathtub with silver wings. I see what you mean, Sophie said, but I didn't know you could mix one dream with another. Dreams like being mixed, the BFG answered. They is getting very lonesome all by themselves in those glassy bottles. Right, Sophie said. Now then, do you have dreams about the Queen of England? Oh, lots of them, the BFG said. And about giants? Of course. And about giants eating people? Swiggles of them, the BFG said. And about little girls like me? Those is the commonest of all, the BFG said. I has bottles and bottles of dreams about little girls. And you could mix them all up just as I want you to, Sophie asked, getting more and more excited. Of course, the BFG said, but how is this helping us? I think you was barking up the wrong dog. Now hold on, Sophie said. Listen carefully. I want you to mix a dream which you will blow into the Queen of England's bedroom when she's asleep. And this is how it will go. Now hang on a minute, the BFG said. How was I possibly going to get near enough to the Queen of England's bedroom to blow in a dream? You was talking dumb silly. I'll tell you that later. For the moment, please listen carefully. Here is the dream I want you to mix. Are you paying attention? Very close. I want the Queen to dream that 9 disgusting giants, each one about 50 feet tall, are galloping to England at night. she must dream their names as well. What are their names again? Flesh lump eater, man hugger, bone cruncher, child chewer, meat dripper, gizzard gulper, maid masher, blood bottler, and the butcher boy. Let her dream all those names, Sophie said, and let her dream that they will be creeping into England in the depths of the witching hour and snatching boys and girls from their beds. Let her dream they will be reaching into the bedroom windows and pulling them out of their beds, and then... Do they eat them on the spot, or do they carry them away first? She asked. They is usually just popping them straight into their mouths like popcorn, the BFG said. Put that in the dream, Sophie said, and then the dream must say that when their tummies are full, they'll go galloping back to giant country where nobody can find them. Is that all? Certainly not, Sophie said. You must then explain to the queen in her dream that there is a big friendly giant who can tell her where those beasts are living so that she can send her soldiers and armies to capture them once and for all. And let her dream one last and very important thing. Let her dream there is a little girl called Sophie sitting on her windowsill who will tell her where the big friendly giant is hiding. Where is he hiding? Asked the BFG. We'll come to that later, Sophie said. So, the queen dreams her dream, right? Right, the BFG said. Then she wakes up and the first thing she thinks is, oh, what a horrid dream. I'm so glad it was only a dream. And then she looks up from her pillow and what does she see? What does she see? The BFG asked. She sees a little girl named Sophie sitting on her windowsill, right there before her very eyes. How is you going to be sitting on the queen's windowsill, may I beg? The BFG asked. You are going to put me there, Sophie said, and that's the lovely part about it. If someone dreams there's a girl sitting on their windowsill and then she wakes up and sees a little girl, then that's a dream come true, is it not? I is beginning to see where you is driving to, the BFG said. If the queen is knowing that part of her dream is true, then perhaps she is believing the rest as well. That's about it, Sophie said, but I shall have to convince her of that myself. Yet you is wanting the dream to say there is a big friendly giant who is also going to talk to the queen? Absolutely, Sophie said. You must. You're the only one who can tell her where to find the other giants. How was I meeting the queen? Asked the BFG. I is not wanting to be shooted at by soldiers. The soldiers are only in the front of the palace. At the back there's a huge garden, and there are no soldiers at all. There's a very high wall with spikes on it around the garden to stop people from climbing in, but you could simply walk around that. How was you knowing so much about the queen's palace? The BFG asked. Well, last year I was at a different orphanage, Sophie said. It was in London, and we used to go for walks all around there. Is you helping me find this palace? The BFG asked. I has never dared go hide and sneaking around London in my life. I'll show you the way, Sophie said. I is frightened of London, the BFG said. Oh, don't be, Sophie said. It's full of tiny dark streets, and there are a few people about in the witching hour. The BFG picked up Sophie between one finger and thumb and placed her gently in the palm of the other hand. Is the queen's palace very big? Huge, Sophie said. Then how is we finding the right bedroom? Well, that's up to you, Sophie said. You're supposed to be the expert on that sort of thing. And you is absolutely sure the queen will not put me in a zoo with the catty piddlers? Of course she won't, Sophie said. You'll be a hero, and you'll never have to eat snozcumbers again. Sophie saw the BFG's eyes widen, and he licked his lips. You mean it? He said. You really mean it? No more disgustive snozcumbers? You couldn't get one if you wanted to, Sophie said. Humans can't grow them. That did it. The BFG got up to his feet. "When is you wanting me to mix this special dream?" he asked. "Now," Sophie said, "at once." "Oh, when is we going to see the Queen?" "Tonight," Sophie said, "as soon as you've mixed the dream." "Tonight?" the BFG cried. "Why such a flush-bunking flurry?" "Well, if we can't save tonight's children, we can anyway save tomorrow's," Sophie said. "What's more, I'm getting famished. I haven't eaten a thing for 24 hours. "Well, then we'd better get crackling," the BFG said, moving back towards the cave. Sophie kissed him on the top of his thumb. "I knew you'd do it," she said. "Come on, let's hurry." All right, and now they're going to get started on their plan. Next chapter is called Mixing the Dream.